Yeah, thank you, David, and thanks everyone for joining online today. Could I just say I'm going to rush through the presentation fairly quickly because we have 10 minutes. But the final slide, if people get a copy of the presentation, will see there's contact details there of Simon White, my colleague, who's the Director of Investor Relations, and also my contact details so people can reach out to either Simon or myself at any stage if they have any further questions. Next slide, please. Our standard disclaimer applies, and we go straight into what is osteoarthritis. Now, I need to debunk one of the common myths that surrounds osteoarthritis. A lot of people think osteoarthritis is simply wear and tear, and over time the joint wears down and the cartilage wears down, and you end up with osteoarthritis. What we now know is that it is actually a chronic degenerative disease. And we understand at a biochemical level all of the factors that are occurring to lead to the breakdown of all of the tissues in the joint, not just cartilage, but cartilage is the hallmark of osteoarthritis, but it also means the bone that supports the cartilage is breaking down and changing shape. We also know in the knee joint, for example, the menisci are also deteriorating as well as ligaments and tendons. So all of the joint is basically degenerating, and the rate of degeneration exceeds the amount of regeneration that can occur, and then you ultimately lead to failure of the joint. The common symptoms of osteoarthritis for those listeners who may have osteoarthritis will know, or they have family members who have osteoarthritis will also know, is a very painful joint, very hard to move, and it's also a very dysfunctional joint, often stiff and very, very painful to move and bend in relation to the knee. And so therefore people are severely debilitated in terms of their daily activities. We do understand the biochemistry, and what companies like Paradigm are trying to do is to understand, can our drug slow the rate of degeneration and increase the rate of regeneration? And in our last phase 2 trial, which some of the results of that study are being sent off for peer review and publication, and we hope that that will occur very soon, shows very, very clearly that this drug is able to change the disease biomarker profile of an osteoarthritic knee compared to placebo. So as placebo, the disease biomarkers are increasing over time, but what we saw with our drug was that the disease biomarkers are actually reducing over time. So therefore indicating that maybe the disease is slowing down. And we also saw on some advanced imaging, quantitative MRI, that there was some increase in the cartilage thickness of those patients who were on our drug. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see there's 4 radiographs. These are provided there to try and show people that it is a progressive disease going through well-documented, well-standardized grades of disease, which was developed by Dr. Kelgren and Lawrence. And you see grade 1 is a relatively healthy knee, good alignment, and also quite a good space between the end of the femur and the start of the tibia, which is the knee joint. What we refer to this as is joint space width. And although we can't see the cartilage, we assume because the bones are separated, there must be a amount of cartilage keeping those bones from contacting one another. You'll see grade 2, there starts to be a bit of malalignment and the joint shifting laterally. Grade 3, you'll see that there's some changes in the bone occurring, some outgrowths. And then grade 4, you can see at the final bottom right-hand radiograph, the tibia and the femur are in contact with one another, indicating that there is now no longer any cartilage in that particular region. The biomechanics of that joint have also shifted, and that becomes a very painful disease. Going to the next slide, please. As you mentioned in the introduction, David, over 500 million people have osteoarthritis. We know that around 70% of people with osteoarthritis have osteoarthritis of one or both knees, reducing the addressable market to 365 million people. And we know that people with moderate to severe knee osteoarthritis is a further discount. So we have around about 240 million people worldwide with addressable moderate to severe osteoarthritis, which is our focus. We also know that around 81% of people with osteoarthritis are very dissatisfied with their current medications. Next slide, please. So what we know is that in terms of the market, this is a very significant unmet medical need. So we know that there's limited treatment options, and they really only focus on short-term pain relief. There's no indication that these products that are currently used will help slow the rate of degeneration and increase regeneration. That has not been shown with these compounds like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, corticosteroids, or hyaluronic acid, etc. We know that it creates a huge economic burden in the middle panel of the slide. That means that governments across the world are seeing ever increasing amounts of money spent directly on treating people with osteoarthritis, and osteoarthritis is the major form of disability for musculoskeletal indications, and it has around about $136 billion of direct cost to treating people with osteoarthritis in the United States. So in the final panel there, we know that there is a very strong demand for safe and effective long-term pain relieving drugs. And that has been reinforced by this year in September 2025, the US FDA put out a position paper which actually said that they were looking for ways of increasing the availability of non-opioid based treatments for chronic pain. So there's a FDA guidance that we've looked at very carefully, and we believe our drug meets those requirements. In other words, it's safe, it's effective, it can provide long-term relief without being addictive, and all of those sort of characteristics. Next slide, please. So the unmet medical need arises when you look at this particular slide, and if we start at the top left, we'll see the green color means effective and the red color means ineffective. If we look at the top line as an example and just cast our eyes down to the bottom of the slide, across the bottom you'll see the stages of osteoarthritis: minor, mild, moderate, and severe. As the disease progresses, you can see the class of drugs like analgesics or NSAIDs are quite effective in minor OA, but as the disease progresses past mild OA, you start to see that those products are no longer effective. And that is the case for the opioids and steroid injection. So basically, when you look between that moderate to OA lane and cast your eyes up, you'll see all of the medications are largely ineffective in treating osteoarthritis, which creates this very large unmet medical need. Next slide, please. So what is Paradigm doing to address this osteoarthritis spectrum, which, as I mentioned, goes from minor to severe? We have a dual PPS product-based therapeutic solution that we are hoping will transform osteoarthritis management across the globe. We aim for both of these products to shift the treatment to an earlier stage in the disease to try and encourage the reduction of degeneration and encourage regeneration, so patients don't have to go through that journey of mild all the way through to severe. And both of these products are heavily aligned with the US FDA focus on non-opioid chronic pain solutions. Next slide, please. So this is how we see Paradigm's future. Xylosol, which is an injectable form, subcutaneous, I should add. So subcutaneous injection of PPS is currently in a phase 3 program, and that really addresses the moderate to severe osteoarthritis sector. But as I mentioned, we know that there's around about 250 million people currently with moderate to severe osteoarthritis globally, which means there's also several hundred million people who are at the minor to mild stage, and they haven't progressed to moderate to severe OA at this stage. Hence the introduction of a new concept, which is an oral product. So as I mentioned, Xylosol subcutaneous injection for the moderate to severe. The oral product being developed is called pentocoxib, which, as the name suggests, is a combination of oral PPS and a COX-2 inhibitor, such as Celebrex or meloxicam, and people with osteoarthritis will know those drugs very well. So that then this combination produces a non-opioid solution for people with mild to moderate osteoarthritis, where what we found in a small comparison study was that PPS and COX-2 together were more effective than the COX-2 inhibitor alone. So it's already shown some very good signs that this could be a very successful product going forward. However, our focus is very firmly on the phase 3 program, because that is really where a lot of money can be generated, and we want to move through that program and get to the revenues as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So the phase 3 program, this is a snapshot of where we are now. In the first stage, I'm moving from left to right across the timeline here. The study design is 466 subjects who will be randomized 1-to-1, one group getting placebo, the other group getting the active drug. And we're evaluating subcutaneous pentazan polysulfate sodium, or xylitol, for moderate to severe osteoarthritis. The dosing regimen has already been proved through a phase 2 dose ranging study, and the lowest effective dose has been estimated to be 2 milligram per kilogram twice weekly for 6 weeks. So it's a total of 12 injections. There's no further injections, but what we found in our phase 2 study was that those 12 injections over 6 weeks is sufficient to then reduce the pain meaningfully and statistically significant compared to placebo out to 12 months for both pain and function. So it's an ideal product in terms of the requirements from the FDA guidance document. The primary endpoint will be change in average daily pain at day 112, which is roughly 3 to 4 months, which is a very significant improvement over any other drug on the market. And we're also including a number of secondary endpoints, which includes the patient global impression of change, which is very important to the FDA, and also imaging and biomarkers. So imaging, MRIs and X-rays will be taken to see whether there's some reduction in the degeneration of the joint, and if approved and statistically significant over placebo, could go onto the product label. The trial oversight is being conducted by 2 CROs, Advanced Clinical in the United States and also NBCD, who's joined us recently, who are running some of the centres that have been very high recruiters in the past, and NBCD's out of Denmark. And as you mentioned, David, the company and all of our existing shareholders are very excited with the idea that we will have an indication over the success of the program around the middle of 2026. So literally 6 to 7 months away before we know what the likely outcome of the study will be. And if positive, then we believe that that will be a very significant milestone for the company, attract a lot of commercial interest, and also see us on our way to applying to the FDA for registration. So next slide, please. Again, some more details about the phase 3 program. We have over 60 sites across Australia, US, Hong Kong, and Moldova on track for full activation by the end of this month. In the centre there, hundreds of patients are already in screening, and strong conversion rates from screening to randomisation. So people are being treated currently under the phase 3 program in both the United States and the USA, and we also expect to have some screening ongoing in Hong Kong and Moldova as of the middle of January 2026. The final panel there just mentions again NBCD working alongside Advanced Clinical. So we've gone with this complementary CRO to complement our primary CRO to make sure that we have some competitive tension, because obviously the CRO that recruits the most patients will generate the most income. So we think that this is a very good way of making sure that we get very good recruitment rates so that we can achieve that interim analysis. Next slide, please. So these, I think, are some of the investment highlights for people watching. In terms of de-risking, Paradigm has conducted multiple phase 2 studies. We've done 2 safety and efficacy studies over the journey. Both of those studies had positive outcomes, and we did a third phase 2 study, which was our dose ranging study to establish the minimal effective dose. Across all of those studies, we saw very consistent data outcomes, and we have a very good idea of how the drug is likely to perform in the phase 3 study. We also saw very important disease-modifying activity, which means that the rate of regeneration was exceeding degeneration, as indicated by quantitative MRI and synovial fluid biomarkers. We have treated over 800 subjects in Australia based on the TGA Special Access Program, and we have seen people typically apply for redosing at around about 12 to 18 months. So we do know there is a good sustained activity of the drug. We do have an optimized phase 3 design, which means for investors, we have got agreement with the FDA before we started our phase 3 trial, which means that we're unlikely to receive any further questions about the protocol from the FDA, and we can now complete that knowing that the FDA has seen the design and signed it off. The phase 3 clinical trial has commenced. As I mentioned, subjects currently being treated in the US and Australia. The program has got fast track designation from the US FDA, which means we'll move through the FDA faster than other applicants because it is a fast track designated program. As I mentioned at the outset, it's a very, very large market, over 500 million people with osteoarthritis, and 81% of them are dissatisfied with current treatments. And the near-term inflection point will be 25% of patients recruited, 50% of patients recruited, 100% of patients recruited, and the interim analysis at the middle of 2026. Next slide refers to those contact details that I mentioned before, David. So I'll wrap it up there and see if there's any questions from the audience.
Thanks, Paul. We have a few questions come through, so we'll jump straight into it.
Sure.
How have refinements to screening criteria improved enrolment in the phase 3 program?
Yeah, it's fairly technical, David, but I think an overarching comment would be, look, the less interventions or requirements of a patient to turn up to a particular clinic at a particular time encourages greater enrolment and sustainability in the study. I think if you're asking patients to come back at frequent intervals, then I think you do run the risk that some people, become tired, exhausted, and just drop out of the study. In terms of recruiting, again, if the number of exclusion criteria is reduced, then the likelihood of someone going in from screening to an active participant in the trial is increased as well. So I think we sat down with the FDA, we went through all of the data from our large phase 2 study, which was over 600 subjects, and we were able to demonstrate to them that any of their concerns that they may have had been supported with good clinical data, and therefore they were able to reduce some of those interventions that I mentioned, like going back to a clinic first thing in the morning, or having less contact with the hospital, all of those things adding up to a greater retention rate within the study.
A question's come through that I think sort of extends that a little bit. How do advanced clinical and MBCD complement each other operationally across the global trial footprint?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, Advanced Clinical is a US-based CRO with operations in Australia. We also think it's important to have some diversity in terms of the ethnicity within the trial. I mean, we have to have somewhere in the region of 50% of the subjects coming out of the United States. The FDA hasn't put a strict percentage on the trial, but generally it's around about that 40 to 50% from the United States. But it's also important in other jurisdictions to have some local ethnic populations treated with the drug. So that's why we think Hong Kong is very interesting. Hong Kong has been a very fast recruiter, and MBCD have a good relationship with the treating centres there. They can introduce us to a site that can gear up and start getting ready for the study in an accelerated manner. And also, we note that there is a 1+ program being initiated by the Hong Kong regulators, which says that if you get a registration in another jurisdiction, such as the United States, you can then apply to the Hong Kong regulators as long as you have some Chinese data, and which is why we're doing that. We can then segregate that data from the rest of the data, say this is all Hong Kong patients, and then you can get registration very, very quickly, and you get access to what they call the Greater Bay Area, which includes up to 50 public hospitals and has a catchment area of around about 80 million people. So it could be a very early entry as soon as we get the US registration to pivot to Hong Kong, make the application, and get revenue much faster than other jurisdictions, which may still require further studies.
Final two questions. Can you outline the potential outcomes and timing associated with the mid-2026 interim analysis?
Yes, so we expect to have the interim analysis, which will really probably have three broad outcomes. The Data Monitoring Safety Committee will review the data in an unblinded manner, so they will have the code broken. They will review the results of up to 50% of the patients in the trial to date. They will then be determining the drug effect size, and our statisticians have predicted that if the drug effect size is less than 0.1, that means that the trial is unlikely to be statistically significant at the end of the trial, and it would be futile to continue. So we would announce that we have a drug effect size that is not sufficiently large enough to be able to continue the study. Another outcome would be that the drug effect size is between 0.3 and 0.39, which means that the Data Safety Monitoring Committee would say you are all good to proceed. So there are no safety events, and the efficacy at that point of between 0.3 and 0.9 puts the probability of success when we get to 466 subjects, not the 233, but the 466, that we would have upward of 90% probability of having a statistically significant outcome. And then if the drug effect size is above 0.4 or above, then we would have the necessary data to apply for an early stopping of the trial because the efficacy is overwhelmingly positive. So they're the sort of outcomes that we would be looking at, but it's all driven by statistics, and it's all driven around probabilities, and our biometrics department have been heavily involved in designing this program, and we feel very confident that it's going to be 0.3 or above, because that is the typical drug effect size that we have seen in our phase 2 studies. So I think we have a degree of confidence that we'll be proceeding on with the trial come the interim analysis. The interim analysis will also be able to give us a very strong probability of success, which commercial companies who've had an interest in this area but have failed with their own programs would like to make sure that they could have an indication that this is going to be successful, and therefore talk about commercial transactions at that point.
Brings me to my final question. How is long-term real-world evidence from the SAS program informing regulatory dialogue and commercial planning?
That's a great question, David. And look, I think the gold standard is always a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. However, the agency has put out some position papers over the years to say that real-world evidence is very important, and we have that real-world evidence of, as I said, over 800 subjects, where we can point to the fact that this is the type of result that happens in the real world. These people are not part of a clinical trial where they've been, if you like, selected as part of their inclusion-exclusion criteria. These are people who have osteoarthritis, who have failed all of the available medications. They've gone on to this medication and had success. So the FDA looks upon it as very important previous clinical experience with the drug. It adds to our safety profile. There's a number of different reasons why it's very important, but we do think that at the end of the day, the FDA will only be approving the results of a double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center study. So that's why we're doing the large phase 3 study. But we do think, as far as investors are concerned, we have shown in a real population of people with osteoarthritis in Australia and the US that the drug has performed extremely well.
Paul, thanks for your time. We look forward to following Paradigm Biopharma with interest. A big year ahead, some big milestones on the horizon. So investors should watch and follow the company with interest. Paul, thanks for your time.
Thank you, David, and thanks to the listeners.